So, Dr. Paster is a local family physician. Thank you for being here. Are you still practicing in Oregon Clinic?
I fill it. Yes.
Okay, he is still practicing in Oregon Clinic, neighbor right down the road. You might know him from his radio show on personal health, the Your Health radio show. He's also an adjunct professor at the Family Medicine University of Wisconsin, School of Medicine, Public Health. He also currently hosts a podcast called Stay Well with Zorba Paster. In addition, Dr. Paster continued to contribute to a health column at the Wisconsin State Journal. Again, there's a handout and a card for you to have. So we'll be discussing how to care for yourself and caring for others. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Zorba Paster.
So that's off, right? Can you hear me now? I'm not talking. No, I am. So before I start, do any of you have one of these? Yeah. Who would have thought that you would have smartphones, right? Did you ever think that? Who would have thought that you text? How many of you text? Look at that. Did you ever think you would text 20 years ago? No. I mean, I just want to talk to you for a minute about technology. So by the way, if you don't have one of these, if you will take one when you go out, it's my new podcast, because I've been on Wisconsin Public Radio for 35 years, but things have changed. Got a great podcast. We started October 1st, and we're already in the top 1% of all the podcasts, so it's pretty good. We even have a couple of sponsors, Clinky Cleaners. I know you guys use dry cleaning all the time. Right. Clinky Cleaner. But a coffee, which is awesome. Anyway, so before I start, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So, family doc this is enemy territory, by the way. I'm in Oregon. You know, Verona was enemy territory. Yeah. Soccer, come on. Verona, Oregon, really, come on. You guys think you have a soccer team? Really? So this was enemy territory. But I remember, who was the DO who was in town here? Do you remember his name? The doctor of osteopathy in town? You must be old enough to remember when you're coming into town, there's a brick building over there, and there was a doctor of osteopathy. And a lot of people from Oregon went to Verona. From Verona rather, went to Oregon for Dr. Kellogg and Dukersheim. And then the University of Wisconsin opened up their clinic probably 30 years ago. Remember when the UW opened up their clinic? And that's because Verona was a really small town, but you've gotten bigger. You've got a company outside of here, I think it's called Epic, which is much larger place. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about essentially how to care for yourself if you're caring for someone else. So how many of you are either caring for someone else or have cared for someone else in your lifetime? Come on, you're probably all raising your hands, right? You've all cared for someone in your lifetime. So the real issue is, what do you do for yourself when you're caring for other people, right? That's a very important thing. Now, if you've gone on an airplane, you know when the steward or the stewardess starts on the airplane, they talk about what happens if the oxygen level drops. Remember those little things drop from up above? And then they show you on the video or tell you, if you have a young child or someone with needs next to you, put the oxygen on yourself first, and then put the oxygen on the other person, right? Put the oxygen on yourself first, and then take care of the other person. And so that's really the challenge when you are caring for someone else. How do you care for yourself? For a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, how do you care for yourself so that you can live a full life? How do you live a full life when you're caring for someone else who then takes a certain amount of work and energy in your life? And then how do you reach a job that makes you satisfied so that you feel like you've done a good job? So I have 4 children. One of them lives in Verona. 2 live in Seattle. 1 lives in Boston. And they all grew up in the Oregon area. We're a very, very close family. My wife, Penny, passed away a little over 2 years ago in September. We were married just short of 50 years. And she had some special needs. Probably about 10 years before she passed, she had back pain, ultimately needed to be on a walker. so we used a walker to be able to get around from place to place. And then over time, she had some sort of neurological dysfunction. I don't like the word dementia. And the reason why I don't like the word dementia, and we need to have a new word, is it really is a very broader thing. When we think of dementia, sometimes we think of end-stage dementia. But many of us have memory loss which comes with age. Others have memory loss that comes with small strokes. Some with something called Lewy body disease, which is associated with Parkinson. Some with Alzheimer's, the plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's disease. Some with alcoholism, and for many of it, it's just a combination of things, or it's the great unknown. And I'll explain for a minute what I mean about the great unknown. There's a study that is still ongoing that actually comes out of the University of Kentucky, but it's a study that actually has to do with the Carmelite nuns in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So the nuns, it's called the Nun Study. That's actually the name of the study. I think it's probably in its 22nd year at this particular time. So all of the nuns in the study said, there was an investigator at the University of Kentucky, that when they died, they would donate their brains to autopsy. In other words, when they died, they would take their brains to autopsy to try to look and see what were the causes or the elements that had to do with memory loss. So if you look at nuns, and when nuns actually go into the convent, among other things, when they're 18 years old, when they're novitiates, 16, 17, 18, they have to write an essay. Why do I want to be a nun? Something of that nature, that information. And then the nuns don't smoke. They're not excessive alcohol drinkers. They live a moderate life. In other words, they don't live to excess. Many of them are older. There are very few young nuns within it. These are older nuns who have lived there their entire time, so they have their medical records. Lots of good information. And many of them live to a ripe old age. Some of the nuns have memory loss. Some of the nuns do not. So when they look back at the nuns who had memory loss, you would expect that the nuns who had memory loss, that many of them would have what we call the plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's disease, or the strokes of multi-stroke problems, or would have Lewy body dementia, which is associated with Parkinsonism. And indeed, that was the case. Many of the nuns who had memory losses, when you looked at the autopsy of their brain, had that. But that wasn't what was interesting about the study. A number of the nuns who showed minimal evidence of any memory dysfunction had Alzheimer's disease. In other words, they lived life well into their 80s and 90s, had some of the memory loss that we all have, but when you autopsy their brain, it turned out they had the plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's disease. You go, wait a minute, where's the disconnect here? The brain looks like they have Alzheimer's disease, but in function, they don't appear to have Alzheimer's disease. They may have some of the things that you cannot do when you're older. You know, who remembers telephone numbers anymore, right? We don't have to. You know, you remember, everyone here in this room remembers their home phone number, right? I'm Independence 32993. That was before it was 463. So it turns out that the presence of physiological processes that go on in the brain does not automatically mean that you will lose all of those processes. You may lose them and you may not. The nuns who had idea density when they were 18 years old that they wrote, and that when they were 18 or 19, why I wanted to become a nun, those were the nuns that were least likely to show problems when they were in advanced age. But they were also the nuns that were also engaged in different jobs in the nunnery. They were more likely to be the nuns who were doing education, more likely to be doing accounting. They also did some of their own electrical work and their own plumbing. In other words, they were using their brains all the way throughout their lives. So that may be one of the issues that's associated with memory loss and dementia. Now, and I'm going to get to the prospect of what I want to talk about and caring for yourself. But one of the issues that happen with memory loss is there are normal things that go on with memory loss that are associated with age that are not wrong. So for instance, our ability to hold numbers within our head was much better when we were younger. Of course, we were doing it more. But when somebody said, I'll give you my phone number, years ago, you take the phone number, you might write it down right away, or you might be able to remember it. But when you're older, there's a natural attrition, a natural disability to actually be able to do that. That's something that decreases with age. So people, for instance, who are very good at math and could do equations, when they get older, often have to write things down. So there's a natural process that goes on. And then there's an unnatural process. Then there's a natural process that goes on that's associated with memory loss. So when I look back to my lovely wife, Penny, she had physiological problems as she got older because she was on a walker and moving. And then eventually she had a memory loss. That memory loss turned into dysfunction. And ultimately, that was the cause ultimately of her demise. Often from the beginning of memory loss like Alzheimer's to the time when you pass away is usually anywhere between 5 and 7 years. And you often don't pass away directly from that disease, but the problems associated with that disease, which often have to do with the inability to swallow, the inability to move, and you often then die from pneumonia. So my personal issues, which is why I started to talk about this, is how do you care for yourself when you're actually doing something? Now, the kind of interesting thing about this is I was very lucky. I'm a physician, I'm well-versed. When she fell down, broke her sacrum a year before she died, was in St. Mary's Nursing Home. I was able to help her there. It took her 9 weeks to get out. Should have taken about 2 to 3 weeks, but she had trouble figuring out how to get up, and how to stand and so on. But when she perished, I kept on feeling guilty about the things I did not do. I didn't focus, in many ways, on the things I did do, but I kept on thinking about the things that I didn't do. And the more I thought about that over time, I realized that this is a common issue, that there can be a guilt over the things that you don't do with someone, even if you're doing a good job. When it comes to perfection, it's not a Disney World. If you look at, Cinderella, it's a 90-minute cartoon, and after 90 minutes, they live happily ever after. They never tell you what happens when they have children, right? Even though they may have a housekeeper because they're prince and princess. But it's a 90-minute cartoon. The real issue is what can you do to help you care for somebody that you're having, that you're caring for. Because if you don't care for yourself, you're not going to do a good job for them, as good as you can do. And so I've got a few tips that I want to share with you. Everyone has this handout? Got it? I want to go through a few of these things. Do you want a handout? I think we have. Let me get some. Louisa will get it. By the way, that's my daughter-in-law. I think we should all clap for her. She's my daughter-in-law. She probably will be upset that I said clap for her now about it. And she lives in the Verona School District. I have 2 grandchildren in the Verona School District, which is awesome, by the way. Although they're not in the Oregon School District, which would be actually a bit better. So I've got some ideas of what you should do, and I want to go. So first of all, you can't pour. I was looking at the other day about something. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you don't help yourself, you're not going to be able to help the people who you want to actually help. So there are a few things that I think you have to do. Number 1, 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Now, when I say 6 to 8 hours of sleep, come on. I mean at least 7 to 8 hours when you're in bed. They always talk about, I wish you could sleep like a baby. Babies wake up like every 3 or 4 hours and have to eat, right? I mean, sleeping like a baby, right? Babies don't really sleep very well. But the idea that you should be in bed and try to relax is extremely important. So there are a few things that I think are important in terms of insomnia issues, sleeping issues. Number 1, if you're not sleeping well, talk to your pharmacist or your physician and see whether or not the medications you're taking might be keeping you up. There are side effects from medications. You don't know what they are unless you talk to a healthcare professional. So it might be taking the medications at the wrong way at the wrong time. It may be keeping you up. Good example is something you're probably not taking. Good example would be a decongestant. Decongestants keep people up. Antihistamines do not keep people up. So get a med review at the pharmacy find out if any of the medicines are keeping you up. And while you're doing a med review at the pharmacy, do a med review with your healthcare provider and see whether or not you need to be on all those medicines. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. There are medicines that you're put on when you go to the hospital, go to the doctor, whatever, and are kept on year after year after year that you may not actually need. Now, I had a patient of mine in Oregon. She's since passed away, but I asked her if I could talk about her. But she was one of the librarians in Oregon. Terrible osteoporosis. She had something called the Dowager's hump, where you bend over like that. And she was on a minimal dose of hydrocodone. Hydrocodone is no good. Minimal dose. 5 milligrams in the morning when she got up, 5 milligrams a night when she went to sleep. Minimal dose. As you know, hydrocodone is a controlled substance. And so once a year we have to do urine tests. And we're allowed to tell a person that we're actually going to do it. Once again, she's a librarian. She knows her words. Okay, very important. Very important, the story. So I told her, I said, when you come in 3 months, we have to do a urine test. Do not pee before you come to the office. What's the first thing you do when you go to a doctor's office? You empty your bladder. Why? I don't know. You don't want to have a full bladder when you're in the doctor's office. What is it about it? Little kids don't empty their bladder until it's overflowing, but adults do. So came in, once again, small dose, 5 milligrams in the morning, 5 milligrams in the evening. I'm not worried about her. She's been on it for 15, 20 years. I came into the office, terrible osteoporosis, and I said, my nurse Terry is going to take you to the back to do a urine test. She said, that won't be necessary. I said, why? She said, well, I stopped taking my hydrocodone. I said, why'd you do that? She said, I thought if I have to do a urine test, I'll just stop taking it. I said, how's your pain? She said, about the same. Said, about the same? She said, yeah. And then she looked at me and she said, have I been on a placebo all these years? Well, by one definition, placebo means there's nothing in there, no. But another definition, which placebo means in Greek to please, yes. So she'd been on hydrocodone for all those years because she had terrible pain, and once she stopped, her pain was just as terrible as it was before. You need to look over all your medications once a year. You need to find out if you need them, and you may decide with your healthcare provider to go off of them. I don't recommend that for that, by the way, with blood pressure pills or cholesterol pills, or the pills that you may need, such as Eliquis, which you may need because you're in and out of atrial fibrillation. But a good evaluation is important. That evaluation, and we're talking about sleep now, is part of an over-the-counter evaluation of what you're taking over the counter. So are you taking supplements? Supplements that might have something that's stimulating you so you're not sleeping at night. The other issue is over-the-counter sleeping pills. With the exception of melatonin, all of the over-the-counter sleeping pills are basically antihistamines, such as Benadryl. They're antihistamines that make you sleepy, such as chlorotrimazole, which is chlorpheniramine. And they're not healthy for older people. First of all, you may not urinate as well, and if you're a guy, your prostate may lock up, you may get a urinary tract infection, and you might have to have a catheter, which nobody wants to have. So if you're taking an over-the-counter sleeping pill other than melatonin, you have to get that evaluated by your physician. The next thing for sleep, once again, you try to get sleep, is if you're looking at TV or you're looking at this before you go to sleep, or you're looking at a computer, the light from a TV, a phone, or a computer is detrimental to sleep. It's detrimental to sleep. Reading a book with indirect light, because you've got a light in back of you and you're reading it this way, is positive for sleep. Doesn't matter if you're reading or something, but if you're looking at it. So before you go to sleep, do not shut off the TV. Shut it off 30 minutes before you go to sleep. Doesn't matter if you have the radio on or something else. Doesn't matter what you have on. But you don't want to have something that comes out of a tube for 30 minutes before you go to sleep, because that can't interfere with your sleep. So what I happen to do at night is either I'm reading something, or I've got an app from the library called Libre, and I listen to old-time radio. So I'm listening to Jack Benny. Remember Jack Benny? You know, how old are you? 39. I remember as a kid thinking, why is that so funny? Now that I'm 78, I really do think it's funny. But I listen to old-time radio or something else that puts me to sleep. But I do not look at any screen within a half an hour, because that will interfere with your sleep. You cannot care for somebody who you need to care for if you're not in bed 6 to 8 hours a night. Now, you may have to get up because of Mother Nature. You may have to get up because you have to care for the other person. And if you can't get right back to sleep, then you've got to increase that time in bed to 9 hours. If you're going to take a nap during the day, you must limit it to 30 minutes or less one time only. Probably 20 minutes. Once you get over 30 minutes, it will interfere with your nighttime and sleep. So people your age, you're all senior citizens, people, most of you, your age, if you're tired, you nap during the day, and your nap, if it's an hour to 2 hours, interferes with your sleep at night. So you get into this terrible pattern where you're napping for an hour or two because you're tired, and you're not sleeping at night because you're napping for an hour or two during the day. So good night's sleep means, if you want to, a 20-minute nap during the day, and then you're tired at night, and staying in bed for at least 7 to 8 hours. That's important for you to be able to do. Now, the next thing that's important with the daily check-in is, do you take 10 to 15 minutes to actually do something for yourself? Do you take 10 to 15 minutes to do something for yourself? You've got to be able to do that. You have to be able to take some time. So you have to figure out within your schedule where you're going to be able to do it. It's better to take more time than that, but you've got to take basically, just like little kids did at school. You have to have a recess in the morning or a recess in the afternoon. And you have to figure out, schedule-wise, how you're going to do that. You know, no one needs, you may need 24-hour care, but the person that you're caring for is not always necessarily in your face, actively involved with you for 24, for the amount of time that you're up. So you've got to look at a schedule and say, when am I going to take my break in the morning? When am I going to take my break in the afternoon? When am I going to take my break in the evening? And then you should put it down on a sheet of paper and do it at those times. In other words, actually do it. Make yourself a diary. Make sure you take that time and make sure you do it every single day, and that's your time off. It may be right after breakfast. It may be if the other person is in a wheelchair, when they go to sleep, and you go somewhere else. You go into a different room and you remove yourself from that person, because if you're in the same room with that person, it is much more difficult to be able to do it, because you will be attending to them while you're in that room. And that break is very important for you. So one of the issues that I had, Penny, my wife, loved to have her back scratched at night. She really did. I didn't do it every night because I just didn't do it every night. I was tired. I had what I call cognitive overload. Could I have done it every night? Probably could have done it. I felt bad about it. In fact, even when I talk about it now, 2.5 years later, I wonder, why didn't I do that every night? But the fact was, I wasn't able to do it every night. I mean, I know that from a cognitive point of view. I just had to remove myself. We had dinner, we watched something on PBS, Finding Your Roots, that we liked. We talked about something. I would then say, I would put her to bed. We had a bed set up in our den. And I don't know, I needed a break. And I knew I needed a break, so I would do that. That didn't get over the guilt that I still have 2.5 years later. I can deal with that guilt now. But that's okay. It's okay to have it. You just have to be able to put it to the side. But you need to do something for yourself. Morning, afternoon, and evening. And you've got to schedule it in so you actually do it. And you don't say, well, I didn't have time to do it today. Because that's bullshit. Oh, sorry, Mom. I said bullshit. I should have just said bull. You died in 81, but you're still in my brain. And I can still taste the ivory soap in my mouth. How many of you had soap in your mouth? Come on, real raise of hands.
Put it there.
Ivory soap. They didn't have liquid soap in those days. I still remember in Chicago, I grew up in Chicago, and we're going across to my Aunt Lee's house in Chicago. And it's hot. We don't have air conditioning. My Aunt Lee had air conditioning. They had more money. They had air conditioning. We didn't have air conditioning. And we're going to go out for ice cream. And so I don't know what I said to my mother. I have no idea what I said. So she walked into my Aunt Lee's house, walked into the bathroom, and shoved a bar of ivory soap. It wasn't a big bar. It was like a small bar, right in my mouth. And I can still taste it from my teeth. I spit it out. She said, I hope you learned your lesson. I said, I probably had bubbles coming out of my mouth. And I said, yes. And then she said, well, if you learned your lesson, we're still going out for ice cream. You want to come? So it's really, I remember, we went out for ice cream. She, as long as I said I learned my lesson, which I did, I don't remember ever getting ivory soap in my mouth again. Now, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about today. But anyway, now, You need a nourishing snack for yourself every single day. So every single day, you have to have a nourishing snack. So you have to think about what you're going to have. Now, when I say a nourishing snack, I don't mean Cheetos, Twinkies, Little Debbie's, or potato chips. I mean something that is nourishing, something that's good for you, something that's good. It should be high fiber because all of you have bowel problems one way or another. Everyone in Wisconsin thinks of constipation. They think if they don't have a good BM every single day, they're going to blow up and die. I mean, that's the fantasy of our state, is that we have to have a bowel movement, a good BM every day. Everyone always laughs when I talk about bowels. But you should have a nourishing snack. It can be veggies, it can be a piece of fruit, it should be something every single day. If you can, it can be time for yourself. It could be yogurt. But it should be a nourishing snack every day in between your meals. Have you moved your body? I want everyone to go like this with their hands. Go up. Come on, everybody. Let's go down. We're going to do it 5 times. 1, 2. Actually, we're going to do it 10 times. 3. Come on. Really high as you can. 4, 5. We're halfway there. 6. Come on, really high. High, reach as high as you can. 7, 8. Almost there. 9, 10. How do you feel? Don't you feel more awake? Yeah, so
Rotate it up.
I rotate a cup. But you feel more awake. You actually feel more awake. Your muscles feed your brain feeds your muscles. And if you're sitting down and you're not doing even something like that, you are not reaching your highest potential, and therefore, you're not doing as good a job as you can. We just got your heart going a little bit, maybe 5 or 10 beats per minute more. But you're not reaching your heart potential. So every single day, you should move some exercise that you're doing. I don't care if it's chair exercise. I don't care if it's walking around. But it's got to be something. I highly recommend, if you are mobile, that everyone get a step counter. It doesn't have to be an iWatch like I have, an Apple Watch. You can get a step counter at Walmart for $20. Very simple. $20, count your steps. The minimum number of steps is not 10,000. 10,000 was a made-up number from the first company that made pedometers in Japan 30 or 40 years ago, because it's a lucky number in Japan. It turns out if you're below 2,000 steps a day, it's really about 1,500, 1,800. You are more likely to be very at risk for falling and more likely to become frail. The number below 2,000. Turns out once you get to about 4,000 or 4,500, you are much more likely to actually be stable, and it's good for your heart. There are 3 things when it comes to exercise. There's aerobics, there's balance that comes to that, and there's strength. There's 3 different things. So aerobics would be walking quickly, like this. Doesn't have to be on a treadmill, just walking quickly, get the heart going. Balance means standing somewhere, if you can do it, and standing on one foot and making sure that you're not going to fall. That can be balance. Or going and doing Tai Chi, going to one of the excellent exercise programs here in Verona. And strength means you're actually walking and doing strength. You're lifting up your feet and other things. You can go to a whole bunch of different. If you go to Google, you'll find strengthening exercises, which are excellent that you can do. But those are the 3 things you do. So the other thing you have to do when you're thinking about the loved one you're caring for is, have you moved your body? And if you haven't had your snack and you haven't moved your body and you haven't had your time out like it says on there, you're not going to do as good a job. And remember, perfection is the enemy of good enough. Your goal is not perfection. Perfection does not exist in this world. Good enough does exist. So you're not shooting for perfection. You're shooting for good enough. And the last thing in this first part is hydration. You know, in Wisconsin in the wintertime, we're a desert. We've got snow out there. But we really are a desert. We're a desert in our house. We may put on the humidifier, but you've got to be hydrated. 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, or juice, or something like that. Not beer, not 6 to 8 glasses of beer a day. You have to be careful. Beer does not count in the water part. But it's about 6 to 8 glasses a day. And we're not talking about 16 and 32-ounce glasses. I'm talking about 8-ounce glasses. Best way to do that is to have a little glass next to you, put some ice in it if you like it cold, and just carry it around to make sure you stay hydrated. One of the issues with falling, especially among senior citizens, and especially in the morning when they get up, is they're not hydrated enough. So you get out of bed, you haven't had anything to drink for 8 hours, you get up, go to the washroom, and you may faint. The washroom at your age is actually the most dangerous place in your household because you go to the washroom, you're walking there, especially in the middle of the night, in the morning, you may sit there, you're doing something called valsalving. You want to have a bowel movement, get out that poop as much as you can. You stand up too quickly, you get dizzy, fall down, crack your head on either on the commode or on the sink next to it, get a subdural hematoma and die. And I'm serious about that. Wisconsin is #1 for accidental falls in the country. #1 in the country. And then we make jokes, well, it's about our brandy old-fashioned Swede and it's beer. No, that's not the case, because Minnesota, they drink about as much as we do, whether or not they admit it or not. But they drink about as much as we do, and they're not anywhere near #1 in the country. They're in the middle of the road. So there's something else that we're doing. So when you go to sleep tonight, you should have something at the side of your bed, a glass of water or something something in a sippy cup, not a kid's sippy cup. And when you get up in the morning, before you get up, and when you get up to bed, sit on the side of the bed and drink 4 to 6 ounces of water before you get up. And you are much less likely to fall in the bathroom. Very, very important. But you've got to be hydrated. So that's your daily check-in. Like I said, 7 hours of sleep in bed at night, 10 minutes without guilt, 3 times a day, eat a nourishing snack every day, move your body, if it's even stretching and other things, stay hydrated. So let's do it weekly, it's on here, weekly well-being boosters, okay. Have you asked for help? Think you can do it all by yourself? Maybe. But you won't do as good a job. You might have friends, you might have relatives. You can ask them for help. Some of them will say yes, and some of them will say, I'll get back to you. Of course. I've got to tell you something very interesting. There's Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's really a famous transcendentalist from the 1830s. He has the definition of success. I'm just going to read the first 4 lines. Well, the first part of it is to laugh often, okay. to win the affection of children, and earn the respect of intelligent people, to earn the respect of intelligent critics, and endure the betrayal of false friends. Very interesting. Endure the betrayal of false friends. So you have friends, some of them will rise to the occasion, some of them won't. A lot of them will. And you can say, look, can you come over today for 15, 20 minutes, or an hour or 2 hours, I want to go shopping. You want to go over to, you want to go to the grocery store. You want to go in town to Miller's. Just want to go and shop, pick out some things. You don't want everything brought to your house from somebody else. There's something about getting away. Ask for help. We're in Wisconsin. You're likely to get it. If you don't have anyone to ask for help, you're in a senior center. You can talk to one of the wonderful people at the senior center. They may know other people who are volunteers who are willing to help. And that will help you, because when you have somebody help you, you get a space off so that you can help your loved one. And once again, the final common pathway is to do a good job for the person you're helping. But once again, it's like that oxygen in the airplane coming down on your face. What makes you feel good? Because you're going to have successes. Now, the next thing is knowing when to say no. Somebody asks you to do something. You don't feel like doing it. I have 6 words that if you memorize and you use for the rest of your life, you're older, so you don't have a lot of life left, but use for the rest of your life will help you. Somebody says you want to do something. These are your 6 words. I learned this from Miss Manners, who wrote a book, Miss Manners' Guide to Excruciatingly Correct Behavior. Here are the 6 words. I'm so sorry, it's just impossible. I want everyone to say that. I'm so sorry, it's just impossible. Now, when you say that to somebody who asks you to do something, you don't want to do it. The first thing they'll say is, why not? And what do you say? I'm so sorry. Repeat. It's just impossible. They don't know if you have cancer or heart disease, you just don't like them. Never answer that question, and I will tell you, they will eventually stop asking and answer it a second time. And it will keep you from doing things that you don't want to do. Because there are always things people are asking you to do, and you say, I'm so sorry, it's just impossible. Why? It's just, I'm so sorry, it's just impossible. You know? By the way, it doesn't work for your relatives or your children. It works for everyone else because they will deal with it a little bit further. So part of this is every week, are you connected to a group? Either on Zoom, better than that in person, obviously. Do you have a support group? Do you have somebody who has? Next thing, do you spend some time in Mother Nature? What do we love about this beautiful place is that we can look out over there and we can see Mother Earth. We wouldn't like to be in a room that was totally dark, would we? Might be just as light, but if there are no windows to look out. We love Mother Nature. There's something called biophilia. Biophilia is the desire to be with plants and animals. Have a pet in the house, wonderful. If you love pets, I can love a dog. I always have a dog in the house. A dog, cats, they're okay too. But I mean, you know, have a pet in the house. But it's a support group, but you've got to have some time with Mother Nature of something, in addition to your support group. So you want to develop some time, maybe someone will come over and watch your loved one, that you can go on a walk. Or your loved one is able to go on a walk. Or look at that beautiful device in front that you saw when we came in, where you can say, look, we want to spend some time. What is it called? A trike? That's a support trike?
Trishaw.
What is it?
Trishaw.
It's a trishaw. What a great thing. I looked at that and I thought, I want to be in it. And I'm able to walk. I want somebody to pedal me down the street. What a beautiful thing that is. But you have a senior center here, so you can find somebody that may give you support. You know, use the opportunities that you have. Schedule something that you love to do once a week. Maybe it's watch a movie. Maybe it's go to the library. Maybe it's reading. When was the last time you laughed and smiled? You can do that by watching something funny on TV or listening to Jack Benny or being with somebody who makes you laugh and smile. You've got to do that once a week. You know, are you doing that? Are you taking a break from your screens? You know, as you know, we watch this way too much. You know, go to any restaurant. Let's go to Culver's. Go to Culver's, and right now, if you left here and went to Culver's, you will see 4 people at a table looking at their screen, right? Not looking at each other. Why are they sitting having lunch at Culver's if they're looking at their screen? There's a special button on here. I'm going to show it to you. It's a really interesting button. If you push this button, I'm going to show you. It's a very interesting button. Now watch the screen for a second. I have to get it from the other side. It's a very interesting button. I'm going to show you something magic. It shuts it off. I am disconnected from this. If I look at this screen, look what it is. It's black. It doesn't do a thing. You can actually shut off the screen. If you're having your kids are over for dinner or something like that and you're concerned about it, you take a basket and you say, okay, everybody, put your phone in the basket. Oh, I can't put it. Yeah, put it in the basket. And if you're afraid you're going to take somebody else's phone, you could put a label on it at home and label it with the kid's name. They know which one it is. Put it in the basket and shut it off. How can I shut it off? What if something important happens? Right. How many times do you actually get something really important happening? Think about really important thing. The answer is not that often. So that's part of a weekly booster. Take a break from the screen. Make sure you laugh. Make sure you enjoy something, be it a hobby music, that you spend some time inside, that you're connected with a friend or a support group, that you have said, I'm so sorry, it's just impossible. Once again, memorize that. It's good to do. That you've asked for help, and you take a break from caregiving. These are weekly well-being boosters. You can't do that every day. But if you begin to work on a schedule, you could probably do it once a week. You probably have enough of a support system. You may not. But if not, you come to the Verona Senior Center and you say, look, can I have some help? What do you think is there? There are volunteers here. You would be surprised how many people in our state would like to volunteer and help others. You would be surprised, or you would not be surprised. But if you don't ask for help, you don't get your help. You know, it's just like Santa. If I don't ask him for a gift, I'm not going to get a gift, right? You know, he's a big Santa. Look at him. I mean, this is a tall guy. I mean, look at how big he is. I mean, you guys know how to make a Santa. First of all, he's Wisconsin hefty, right? He's got it right over here. He's got the belt buckle and everything else. He's got glasses. I like it. How old is he, do you think? Hundreds of years old, right? Have you ever seen the Santa, by the way, in Holland? He's thin. Do you remember some of those old Santas from old And many years ago from old books, Santa was thin in Holland. He got fat once he went to Germany. Anyway, next up, emotional and mental health check. Okay, emotional and mental health. Remind yourself, in this case it might be dementia, they have an illness. It's not just them. They have an illness. It's not just them. So I had to sort of remind myself that at times, maybe on and off, where Penny would be frustrated, and when somebody is frustrated, they usually will, lash out is not the right word, but they'll take out their frustration on someone close to them who's not their child, who they know can take it. There's something in the back of their brain, So she would be frustrated, and sometimes I would be stuck in that frustration. Now, when she was part of Grace, I decided that I would, my children said, you should go to counseling. They didn't say, Dad, you're not doing a good job, because I really was doing a good job. But they said, you should go to counseling. And I thought, I don't have to go. I'm a guy, I'm a doctor, why should I go to counseling? I didn't say that to them, but I thought, But then I thought, out of respect, I should go to counseling. I've been in counseling. So I went to a Grace counseling, saw a guy named Kurt. He was awesome. He was awesome. Now, it's very interesting. I don't lose my temper. My father never lost his temper. I don't lose my temper. I'm not from Wisconsin. So I don't lose my temper. Just something. So I was talking to him one day and I said, I don't get angry. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't get angry, meaning I don't lose my temper. So he taught me, I thought I didn't get angry. But actually, he taught me I do get angry. And anger is a normal human emotion. It's what you do with that anger that counts. In other words, it was usually born out of frustration, because Penny and I were together for 50 years, so she would say something, and whatever it was, she would touch my button, but I was very careful. I didn't push it back to her, because that's not who I am, and then I'd get really upset, my own mind, and what am I supposed to do? So I'm going to show you a trick. So my son Eli, one of my kids, said, if you get angry, Dad, why don't you just leave the room for a few minutes and then come back? She's in a wheelchair, nothing's going to happen. And I thought, yeah, I could probably do that. But I'll tell you what I did that was different. I'm going to show you something that was very, very interesting. This is as important as I'm so sorry, it's just impossible. Another trick. She would say something and be upset. And I would get upset by it. And this is what I did. I'm going to show you what I did. Literally, I'm talking about literally. You can't do it figuratively. I would turn around like this. Take about this amount of time. And it would disappear. It was a spell. It was a spell. She cast a spell on me because we're connected. And once I turned around, literally, in that amount of space, all of a sudden, I looked at the situation objectively and realized she was just frustrated. So, because we love each other. And she was just frustrated, and she was during frustration. For whatever reason, that worked. Now, you can't turn around quickly. It doesn't work. And I didn't have to turn around twice. And it's not as if you're going to change the world by just turning around in circles and make all the politicians play nice with one another in the world, no matter which team you're on. But for your loved one, breaking the spell sometimes, just leaving the room, in my case it was simply turning around, that allowed me to function in the appropriate way so I could do a good job. Once again, that's my goal. My goal is to do a good job. So in the emotional and mental health check on your sheet, it's remind yourself that it is whatever it is. It may be dementia or just anger, and it's not them. Now, it may be an element of them, but usually it's not them. It's usually the frustration with the fact that they don't have the same functionality as you do, that you're caring for. And they're simply frustrating, and they're saying that. And if you can objectify that, then you can deal with it in a rational way rather than an emotive way. Because once you get into that emotive way, and it's much tougher, once you get into that screen of where you're in an emotional upset, you're upset, you got to leave the room. You got to do it. Because if you don't, you're not going to get anywhere, and all of a sudden you're going to make them more upset, you're going to get upset, and it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And before you know it, it escalates out of control. And then you feel guilty because it escalated out of control. And if they have a memory loss, they don't even remember what happened. So making sure that you figure out that it's not them, but it's the disease when it comes to dementia. Then acknowledging your feelings without judgment is important. You feel sad. You feel guilty. You feel that you're not doing this, that you're not doing that. Simply acknowledging that can make a difference in you basically not feeling emotively connected to that. The other thing that you can do in addition to, once again, moving your arms, is taking a 1 minute or 2 minute break. You can put it on your phone, you can look at a clock, and just breathing deeply. Not too quickly or you'll get dizzy, but just that was 4 seconds. Maybe it was 3.5 seconds. Wasn't even quite 4 seconds. Just breathing deeply. Look at the clock for 1 minute, if it's a digital clock. Just pay attention to your breath. That's a form of Zen meditation. There's a good app, by the way, if you want to engage in meditation and mindfulness, which I think is good. It's from Mitchie Davidson, the University of Wisconsin. It's called HM, Healthy Minds. It doesn't cost anything. Pull it down on your smartphone. If you don't know how to use your smartphone, grab a teenager on the street. They'll show you how to put it down on it. They'll take care of it. Random kid on the street, probably an 8 or 10-year-old can actually put it, probably a 7-year-old at this day and age. But put it on there, and you can do some meditation to do that. But just deep breathing and paying attention to breathing, once again, is good for you. And then if you're overwhelmed, you've got to reach out for some professional support. If your kids, your relatives, your friends say, you need some help, you've got to get some professional support. That's when you make a phone call to your healthcare provider, to a social worker at Verona, to somebody else to give you some professional support. Because we all go through situations like that. So the affirmations for tough days that I wrote down, that I recommend you do, is I am doing the best I can with what I have. I am doing the best I can for what I have. The next one is my well-being matters too. My well-being matters too. And number 3, I can't do it all, and that's okay. You can say that in the morning, you can say it in the afternoon, you can say it in the evening. So it's very interesting. Years ago, I wrote a book called The Longevity Code, Your Personal Prescription for a Longer, Sweeter Life. Really, it was a national bestseller. We had about 50,000 copies nationally, published by Random House. I got a PBS show out of it, too. Went around the country giving speeches and kind of giving a speech here. I really like doing it. I can't memorize things to be in the theater, so I do this. Anyway, went around the country, and I believe there are 5 spheres that influence our lives. 5 different realms: physical, mental, right? Family and social, spiritual, whatever nourishes our heart and our soul, and material. So where you live matters. Whether or not you've got throw rugs in the house that you can trip on. Whether or not you've got lights around the house so you don't fall. Whether you're happy with where you're living. Whether or not you have plants around if you like plants. That's material. Spiritual is, it may be the church you go to, it may be another church. It may be reading things. People who are spiritual. There's a guy named Ryan Holiday who wrote a book, How to Be a Good Dad. Another book about stoicism. Just reading about people like that makes a difference. Social sphere. COVID, any of you remember COVID? Of course we do. You couldn't see those people that you loved. You couldn't hug people at end of life. You couldn't have parties. It showed how important that social sphere was. The mental sphere, are you keeping your mind active? You don't have to do crossword puzzles. I have dyslexia. I've not done a crossword puzzle since high school. I hate crossword puzzles, but I read. And reading, by the way, exercises your mind much more than watching the screen. And of course, your material, your physical sphere. Taking your blood pressure medicines, you taking all your pills, you've seen your doctor once a year on a regular basis, or a nurse practitioner, or a PA. These all make a difference. But you also need a longevity mentor for yourself. Now, a longevity mentor is somebody who may be alive, older than you, although that's difficult to, I can't imagine people that are older than you. But I mean somebody, I'm old at 78, so I can say that without being insulting. I couldn't do that at 58, but once you get over 75, come on, you can say whatever you want to, and they just blame it on your age. right? I'm so sorry, it's just impossible. I can't stop myself. But anyway, longevity mentor may be somebody who you knew. My Aunt Myrtle was one of my mentors, my Aunt Sylvia, they both passed away. Or somebody you've read about. They tend to have three qualities. Number one, they're lifelong learners. They learn things. You are all, by definition, lifelong learners because you're here trying to learn something. Lifelong learning means you're much more adaptive and you're going to change with the times. You learned about the off button with this. You learned, that was a new thing that you learned. You learned about an app and some other things, but lifelong learning makes a difference. Lifelong learning. The second quality of a good longevity mentor is they're actively involved in life. They go and they do things. They get out of the house and they do things with help or by themselves. But they're actively involved and engaged with other people. And the third thing is they're hopeful. Now, hopefulness is different than optimism. Hopefulness is very interesting. I've thought a lot about really what the definition of hope is. So hope is a feeling and a desire. That's all it is. It's a feeling and desire. It's a feeling that there's something good in front of you that you can get to. And it's a desire to get to that space. It's totally emotional. It's a feeling and it's a desire. Feeling that there's something good and a desire to get there. There was a study years ago in Oxford, in Ohio, at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. It was a longevity trial just like the Framingham Heart trial. They had funding, and then they lost their funding, but they got maybe 40 or 50,000 people in around that area to fill out a whole bunch of questionnaires and other things, looked at them, and then after about 10 years, 8 to 10 years, they lost their funding. And then a research scientist wanted to go back and see who lived and who died and related to their psychological well-being of what they thought about the future. Because they had a whole bunch of questionnaires. And Oxford, Ohio is kind of like Madison, kind of like the Madison area, like Verona. It's actually smaller. So between the life, she could find out who lived and who died. That was pretty easy because there are national statistics for that. And she could then figure that also because usually it's 1 or 2 degrees of separation, like in Verona or in Oregon. You say, whatever happened to so-and-so, and they'll say, oh, yeah, they moved to California. And then somebody else knows, oh, yeah, they really went to here. So she could reproduce it. And here's what they found. The people who thought that that when they got older, things would be good or better, these were mid-aged people, were more likely to live between 5 and 7 years longer than people who thought that the future had nothing in front of them. In other words, that optimism produced longevity. Now, she doesn't know why, but I can figure out why. They're more likely to not smoke cigarettes when they learn they should eat more fiber in their diet to do. They're much more likely to exercise, drink less alcohol, all the things that we know, go to their doctors. But optimism and hopefulness produces longevity and a better life on. So your longevity mentor, if you think of somebody, they're often lifelong learners. They often are lifelong learners. They're actively involved in life, and they're hopeful. Now, when I say old age, I didn't give you my definition of old age, but old age is 25 years older than you are today.
Yep.
You guys are pretty old. So you remember when you were like 5, what was old age? 25 or 30, right? My daughter Vanessa was at Camp Shalom. She was a counselor, and the little kids there wanted to know if she was double digits yet. Somebody here is probably close to triple digits, by the way. So 25 years older than you. When you're 25, you remember 50 was old age. When you were 50, 75 was old age, and so on. So I talk about this all the time. I was in Fitchburg a couple of years ago giving this, and a little old guy came up to me and said, Dr. Paster, how old do you think I am? I have learned never to answer that question. I said 60. He said, I'm 102. I said, wow, you don't look a day over 80. And he didn't. And I said, pardon me, sir, what is old age to you? And he looked up to me seriously with a twinkle in his eye and he said, 103. So there are some exceptions to that. But your longevity mentor is a lifelong learner, actively involved in life and hopeful. So I want to leave you one interesting thing. Edith Wharton, who wrote many years ago, The Age of Endearment and Other Things, she had a quote, "In spite of illness, in spite of sorrow, one can live long past the usual date of one's death if one is unafraid of change, insatiable in intellectual curiosity, interested in big things, and happy in small ways." Interested in big things and happy in small ways. If you make small changes in your life when you are caring for your loved one, you will do better, you will feel better, they will do better, they will feel better, and that's good enough. That's all you need. Thank you very much.